So today, I'm going to talk about chapter 6, the main practice of samatha vipassana. And this is the core teaching of this book, as well as the co-teaching of the Tian Tai school. And even though in this book, it's more introductory, so it didn't go to very deep like the Maha Samatha Vipassana, the book, this huge book, but it already pick out the core of this method. And before I get to the main practice, I would like to say that I mentioned this again about our lineage by Master Sheng Yan, that in our lineage, our teachings has different steps that goes from preliminary counting the breath and go to intermediate samatha vipassana practice. And the purpose is to train our mind to be able to calm and contemplate. And then we will go to advance, such as Hua To and silent emanation. The goal is the same for all the lineage in the Buddhist tradition, that we all want to achieve the Dhyana and Shunyata, basically the highest samadhi and also the highest wisdom of emptiness. Okay, but I have to point out that this is our tradition, but for different traditions, counting the breath can be a method to achieve dhyana and shunyata. And some of the lineage use samatha vipassana and can all the way go to dhyana and shunyata, just because that we are Chinese Chan school. So Chinese Chan, you usually pick up the sudden and direct part of the practice and just go directly use that part of practice. And however, our master found out that, you know, maybe modern people are busier and more things to do right now, especially, you know, the travel is much easier than in ancient time. So we make ourselves much busier than before. So it's really hard for modern people to use the sudden and complete method right away. So our master developed this kind of stages for us to prepare ourselves physically and mentally or spiritually easier to practice the Chan method, which is like Hua To or silent emanation or direct contemplation. Okay, so that's why my talk for this samatha vipassana is to, the purpose is to introduce a method that we can easily identify the problem, that why we cannot calm our mind and why we cannot truly contemplate the mind. Okay, and always like struggle with you know, dealing with the vexation or dealing with the wandering thoughts. These are not the core practice for Chan school. So the chapter 6, Master Zhiyi introduced the method of samatha vipassana in one is during a moving sitting meditation, how to use it and how to overcome difficulties. And the other half part, Master Zhiyi introduced how to practice samatha vipassana during daily activities and contacts. And these are very important for modern people. And also these are the specialty for Tian Tai as principally or methodology wise, that that practice in daily life at any time with any actions that we perform are very important practice indeed. So these are the two major parts for these chapters, and hopefully I'm going to finish the first part during the unmoving state meditation. So first, before we get to how to overcome the difficulties in practice samatha vipassana when we do unmoving state meditation, Master Zhiyi need to explain what the method of samatha and vipassanas are. Okay, so first, there are 3 levels to cultivate samatha, calming the mind. First is to focusing the mind on one object. Okay, the second is to stopping the mind, and the third is to resting on the true state of the mind. Okay, so first, you can see a monkey in a cage. So as you might hear a lot, that we have a monkey mind, right? Jumping around. So because we need to think of a lot of things, and then our mind need to grasp a lot of objects. And so nowadays, because we have too much things to do and not enough time, so we need to do multitasking. When we do multitasking, you know, our mind have to have 5 things at the same time that need to take care of. So when we practice samatha, first is called, we need to focus our mind on one object only. Okay, so Master Zhiyi introduced that the object that we can focus on can be, you know, the crown, glabella is here, and nasal tips, and the belly button, or, you know, the button of feet called arch. There is a center of the feet. So by focusing on that one specific part of the body, that we frame our mind in a cage and keep the monkey mind in a cage, in a small space. So the mind still moving, but, you know, it's limited in very small space, so it won't go too far away. Okay, and this focus, from different traditions, they introduce. Some people say, okay, maybe you can put your cell phone in front of you and then just use that as a focus of object, but then it will have some side effect. So, and Master Jiteng, I read his book. He liked to focus on the, you know, when we do sitting meditation, that the left palms layer on top of the right palms and the 2 thumbs together, right? And we put on top of the legs that we crossed. So Master Jiteng liked to focus on the touching point of the thumbs as the focus, and that's also good. So you can, and usually we recommend to focus on the nasal tips or belly button, these 2 parts, and as the focus, and that will help us to practice further for example, counting the breath, or watch the breath or something. So the first step, we have to use that one focus to collect our mind. You know, don't think of your family issue, don't think of your work, you know, and maybe your travel plan in the near future, or, you know, like, oh, what to eat, you know, what to eat for lunch, all kinds of the things that you need to think of to just bring your mind back to one focus. And the second, once we can practice this well, like you found that, oh, okay, the mind is not jumping around. It's with the body on some point. And then eventually we will go to the next step of samatha. It's called stopping the mind. And the so-called stopping mind is not like, you force your mind not to think of anything. If you do it in the beginning of practice, when you have a lot of scattered thought or you have a lot of emotion, and this kind of forced stopping will create a more so-called the force that feedback to you, and you will be more trouble. You will have even more wandering thought. So when we use stopping the mind, it's like when we can train our mind into one little space, okay, and no significant scattered thought. The mind is with the body, and at this point, the thoughts become like very few. But the thought majorly coming from, like, you're sitting in the Chan hall, and then now you are your mind is with you in the Chan hall. But now, because our habit, you see people sit in front of you, keep moving around. Then you say, don't move, you're bothering me, okay? Or, there is a construction, or people are mowing the lawn, too noisy. And then you have our five organs. When our five organs perceive the environment, then we will habitual reactions to it. And then we have to, at this point, it's easier to stop it, like, breath, and then you will easily let go, okay? But even stopping the mind has different levels. If you are the practitioner, you will know that you will in the Chan hall, you will start from, like, judge people, judge the environment around you, and eventually getting lessened, and eventually you only have like very few. Once a while, like one sitting, one session, you have just like few thoughts floating around, and then it's easy just disappear because you're focusing on the object. For example, the belly button, or the breath, or nasal tip, and then it's just easy. The thoughts just go away. So I remember once, I think my first or second retreat that I practiced with the Shifu at DDRC, and there is one day that I sit well, and then just like peace and quiet and joy, and very few thoughts arise. But then I have problem with that, because I feel like, if that one of the few thoughts disappear, am I seeing the emptiness? And that's it. It's so boring. It's useless. The emptiness is useless, I think. So I thought. So when I have an interview with Shifu, I told Shifu that, I don't have motivation to practice further, because I think, and that's it, it's like emptiness is, and Shifu say, okay, what's your status right now? And I just explain. And this is what Shifu explained to me. Okay. Your practice is just like these candles. And then, your wandering thought is like snowflakes. So when the snowflakes come and it just instantly melt, that's your condition right now. I say, very close, very close. And then Sifu say, okay, you are not seeing the emptiness yet, and it's still not even close, but you can investigate Chan right now. So right now, your physical and the mental condition is about right to investigate Chan right now. So I'm just like, oh, I haven't started yet. I haven't even started yet. So that's the time when I know that, oh, okay, we need to prepare ourselves to, at this point, stopping the mind, to like, like the wandering thoughts, just like snowflakes, very few, and then melts right away, okay, including the grasping by the 5 organs, okay. So that's what I want to share with you, is that stopping the mind is just like the beginning of the mind, that, maybe it's about time to investigate Chan, or to do the contemplation. Okay, that's the second stage of samatha. And once you get to that point, we get to that point, like, thoughts melt right away. Arise and melt, arise and melt. Then third step is resting the mind on the true state of reality, okay, or resting on the true state of mind. But that doesn't mean that we know what true state of mind is, but we need to, at this point, actually, according to Master Ji Cheng's interpretation, is that at this point, actually, vipassana, contemplation coming in, but not a major part. It's like at this stage of calming the mind, we need to try to rest the mind on the true state of mind. And so we need to have the right view about what is the true state of mind. Here, Master Zhiyi said, when thoughts arise, one should know that all dharmas manifest depending on causes and conditions. And therefore, there is no self-entity for the mind to grasp on. When the mind stops grasping, the illusory mind eventually rests. That's so-called calming the mind. So basically, it's talking about no abiding. The true state of mind is no abiding. The mind cannot grasp on anything, and it won't stay. But we think the mind can grasp, attach to something. So now we have to, when the few snowflakes come, don't try to get rid of all of them. So that's another interview. Sifu told me that, Sifu often check on me. Do you still have thought? Do you still have thought? I'm like, yeah. What all is thought? Still have like few thoughts. But Sifu say, great. Don't get into samadhi. You cannot get into samadhi when practice Chan. Okay, that's now different from some other traditions. So when our mind stop at a certain point, and we still have very few thoughts and easily melt, and our mind will not attach to it or think they are real. At this point, we need to contemplate the thought and see the rising and perishing of the thought. So the arising of the thought and the melting of the thought. And from this observation, okay, at this point, the mind needs to go to the subtle state in order to see this process. So causes and conditions, rising and perishing, and see that there is no entity. there is no true things there that we can, hold on to it. And so when we realize this, so the mind rests on the state of no abiding. Okay, repeat. The mind rests on the state of mind of no abiding. The mind is not abiding, is the true state of the mind, and our mind need to stay at that point. Okay. Easier said than done. Okay, so Master Zhiyi provide two very useful troubleshooting interview, I think. Some people didn't talk about this part, but I like this part a lot, so I share with you. So when your mind can get into the point that the mind is not grasping, but the snowflakes keep coming up, keep coming up and up. And then now Master Zhiyi said, then we have to contemplate, where the thoughts come from. It's not from the past, because the past thought is gone. It's not from the present, because the present thought cannot stay. And it's not a future thought, because they are not here yet, future thought. So we have to contemplate that, this is the major topic in the Diamond Sutra, the three minds. The past, present, and future mind are not obtainable. 三心不可得. So the thoughts still coming, melt, and cannot stop. And then so observe the thought. Is that a past thought, the present thought, or the future thought? They are none. And then when no thought, the second, when no thought can be obtained in the past, present, and future, then there is no mind. When there is no mind, there is no Dharma. Okay, through this three steps, and then a practitioner can overcome the thoughts, the mind not grasping, but the thought keep coming up. Actually, if you understand the Yogacara, at this time, the thoughts coming from our eighth consciousness, okay, keep coming up. And are they from the past? You say, yeah, it's past, but the past does not exist. That's why Bo-Xing Fa always remind us that the mother in your mind is not your real mother. Okay, the thought in the past is our attachment, but it's not real. So that's the troubleshooting one. Troubleshooting two is, when we contemplate, contemplating the non-abiding and nothing to obtain, the past, present, and future cannot be obtained. And yet, when we do contemplation, observation needs time. So when our mind can go to very subtle level, we can see the change in a very quick way, in a very short period of time. So in Buddhist, there is a concept called jhana. Okay, so your mind is not abiding and nothing can be attained, you're not attaching to anything, but your mind still observe the change. And so the mind is not free from the notion of jhana to know the arising of the thought. In other words, we need time to observe the arising of the thought, and the notion of time is still there. So in the Diamond Sutra, there are 4 notions, right? And the last one is the notion of life, That means the notion of time. Okay, so according to the calculation, okay, 1 jhana equal to 0.0188 second or 0.0133 seconds. That's very short, right? So your mind come to a very subtle level that in 1 second you can see 50 thoughts, for example, the rising and perishing of 50 thoughts. But you still have the notion of time. So what to do is to contemplate the arising of consciousness is due to the 6 faculties contacting with 6 objects. Otherwise, consciousness never arises. And likewise, to the perishing of consciousness. Okay, so at this point, mind is very subtle, very quick. You can see the arising of the thought. And we have to contemplate that the thought is arise because the 6 faculties contact with 6 objects. Even when you see and hear something, when we see something, it's a thought. It's a many thought there. Okay, when we hear a sound, there are many thoughts. Like, I know is 1 thought. I hear a sound is 1 thought. How does that sound look like? Is another thought. So perception itself has already many thoughts there. But your mind is so subtle that you can see those. So you have to observe that all these thoughts is due to the contact of 6 faculties with the 6 objects. The contact, boom, arise, the thoughts. And also perishing. The thought won't stay perishing because the context, the influence of context gone. And so when the arising and perishing mind ceases, then equanimity, nirvana manifest. Okay, so Master Zhiyi here taught us samatha, calming the mind. At this point is no thoughts, no abiding. The mind is no abiding and no thoughts. Okay. Sounds familiar in the Platform Sutra, okay? So this is Master Zhiyi's teaching for samatha. So I make a diagram, okay? To summarize, observers that we need to observe a focus, objective focus, okay? But then we have to overcome, the observer will grasp the scattered objects first, overcome, detach the, and bring your mind back. So you have cut off your mind grasp the scattered object and focus on one object. Then we have to deal with distracted thought, mainly from the 5 organs, and actually 6 organs. Distract thought through the contact. And lastly, we have to overcome the distraction from the conscious thought arise from the A consciousness, okay? Of course, there's a very complicated mechanism that we briefly talk about in the previous topic, the 100 Dharma, and you can go back to hear about the concept. So we have to overcome the 3 distractions in order to be able to really focus on the object. And then the last step is even the object is empty. And when the object is empty, observer is empty as well. Okay, that's the stage of samatha. Next is two aspects to cultivate vipassana. First is to contemplate to counter-react the defiled mind. 染污心, okay. The so-called defiled mind is intrinsically with us from our karma, okay. The craving, the hatreds, the ignorance and arrogance and doubt, those defiled mind is always with us, okay. That the fundamental vexation that we need to gradually let go through the practice. And the second part of the vipassana is to contemplate, to see the true reality. Okay, these are the two parts that Master Zhiyi taught. First, the 5 contemplation to still the mind that we talked about earlier. But here, what we are doing, what we are facing, it is not in the daily basis. Like, I like to eat ice cream. I have to overcome, my craving, or, I hate this person. Every day I have to see it, in the office, and I have to contemplate loving kindness, I have to overcome my hatreds. This is not now. When we do vipassana, what we are dealing with is those inward. When we sit it in the meditation hall, the one you don't like is not in the meditation hall, right? The ice cream is not in the meditation hall. Your loving girlfriend, your not loving boyfriend is not in the Chan hall. But still, we generate the craving, the hatred, the ignorance, the arrogance. So what we are dealing with is truly from the root vexation, from the 8 consciousness, that we need to take care of it. So I make a table to myself clear that when we have, this sitting there, your mind is so quiet. You see, I have one day sitting, that is so good. But the next day, it's gone. And Sifu said that, okay, your practice has no power, 没有功夫, no power, because it only lasts for one day only. And the second day, and I don't know how, my mind just arises something that I hate. And then so I spend like a section dealing with this hatred. It's so strong because when the mind is very subtle, all the emotion, all the vexation amplify. It's the same when we die. When people die, the consciousness leaves the body, and the mind power become 10 times stronger. At this time, we also need to deal with our craving, hatred, ignorance, scatteredness, and arrogance. Because if we follow, when we die, if our sensitive mind follow our craving, then this karma will bring us to hungry ghosts. If, our mind is to, follow our arrogance, then we go to Ashura. So we got to practice before we die. So when we die and we don't have good friends to help us, to remind us to have the right views, and then we basically follow our habitual mindset. And that's terror. That's very dangerous. Okay. So here, the same thing. When our mind go to very subtle state, your long time, maybe that craving, maybe that hatred is buried in your mind for a long time, maybe from your childhood, will arise. At this point, we have to stop the method and use the 5 contemplation. So craving, we can use impurity, contemplate the impurity of the body. So I heard Shifu say that the one time, one of his disciples quit the retreat, and Shifu tried to persuade him for 3 days, and it didn't work out, and then he left because he kept thinking of his girlfriend. And then he finally left the retreat. Okay, so the craving, or because the drowsiness, it happened to me as well. One retreat I practiced very hard, and the second day, no matter how long I rest, I dozing every session for 3 days, and Shifu eventually asked me to prostrate. This is not like I'm not sleeping enough, or I'm tired, I'm exhausted, something, or my fatigue come out. It's not like that. It's basically my karma arise. So Shifu said, go to do prostration. Then after prostration, the problem solved. Okay. So again, we need to get very familiar with this 5 contemplation. So even in the daily life, when these 5 kinds of situation, condition happen, we need to exercise it. Even when we are in the very deep practice, we still need to exercise it to overcome difficulties, because we never know when will that happen. And sometimes if we cannot overcome it, our practice cannot go deeper. And just like the retreat's over. Okay. So these are the first step. And this point, the contemplation, the 5 contemplation is deeper as well. It's not like arise loving kindness. This loving kindness need to go very deep to unconditional loving kindness, like Rebecca talked about last week. Unconditional love, loving kindness, unconditional compassion. Go to that level. And causes and conditions is the key practice for Vipassana. At this point, so let's talk about the causes and conditions, and how to contemplate causes and conditions. And basically, we are contemplate the so-called dependent origination, 缘起. Okay, so in the book, Master Zhiyi say that, this is the second part, when we overcome the difficulty from the craving, hatred, ignorance, and scatteredness and arrogance, then now we are really, really doing the main Vipassana, contemplate dependent origination, or contemplate the causes and conditions. So in the book, Zhiyi say, okay, contemplate that all Dharma arising from causes and conditions, that they have no form. All Dharmas have no form. So this is very abstract, but no form. Like, okay, hatred is a Dharma. Craving is a Dharma. Can you describe hatred? Can you describe love? Attached love? Can you describe any of your emotion? I'm angry. So what is angry? angry is I don't like you. You bother me. That's not description of angry, okay? Like my pulse, my breathing. But this is not angry. You are describing your breathing. You are describing your pulse, heartbeat. What is angry? Okay, so contemplate. Actually, there's no form. Basically, you cannot describe it. And this is, we give it a name to make it true. Okay, so to make it that and solid object that we can attach to, grasp on. So we make ourselves angry all the time. Maybe the scenario only happened once, but we get angry many, many times when the angry is actually no form. Okay, and then second step, to observe that the causes and conditions have no intrinsic nature. When we know that the causes and conditions have no intrinsic nature, we call it true reality. This is even more abstract. Okay. Now, I'm not trying to say that there is no justice in this world. But justice is a Dharma that we all have in our own mind. But what is justice? And then when we perceive something that we think is injustice, when the causes and conditions come together to make this injustice scenario manifest in front of us, and we have to tell ourselves that there is no intrinsic nature. It's very hard. Like, now, the pandemic. So many people lost their life. So many people lost their jobs, lost their home. They have to find something to blame to. It's Chinese. Chinese create this virus, make our lives miserable. We cannot blame them to think that way because they lost their loved ones, they lost jobs, they lost their home. And they need to find the causes and conditions and give it an explanation. And likewise, when we Asian people in America facing this kind of anti-Haitian crime, we need to find the causes and conditions. We need to resolve it. But I'm not saying that we don't resolve the problem. We need to resolve the problem with a peaceful mind. And it's difficult. It's very difficult. But that's what we need to practice. With a peaceful, calm mind, then we can find the right way to resolve the problem. With emotion, it's very hard for us to find a really good solution that's beneficial to all of the people. Again, it's very difficult. And I personally does not have this wisdom either to resolve the problem yet. But as a practitioners, we need to tell ourselves that there is no first causes, 没有第一因, no first causes to create this phenomena, create all the problems, phenomena, scenario. No first cause, but we all try to find the first cause to blame to. It is because of you, because of this. And that can come out mind when we find something to blame to, okay? But anyway, contemplate dependent origination is not try to find the original causes. We try to contemplate the dependent origination is to see that there is no original causes, no intrinsic nature, no form. Okay. So when all the objects observed turn out to be empty, the observing mind would automatically cease to arise. Okay. Dependent origination is the core teaching, is the most important teaching of Buddhist doctrine. And Master Zhiyi ended with these verses. I translated it to, all dharmas are not firmly fixed. Constantly, they arise in the mind. Whoever sees the emptiness, stop generating perceptive thought, which means no thought. At this point, sounds familiar? No abiding, no form, and no thoughts. It's the core teaching in the Platform Sutra. Okay, so now Master Zhiyi bring us the contemplation, bring us finally to the core teaching of the Buddhism. And then from the middle way teaching, okay. This is the frequent cited phrases that whatever is dependently co-arising, that explained to be emptiness, that being a dependent designation is itself the middle way. Something that is not dependently arising, such a thing does not exist. Therefore, a non-empty thing does not exist. Okay, we can interpret it, but our level cannot directly experience it and cannot directly understand it. It needs practice. Okay, so in summarize, for the contemplation of vipassana is, if we combine the concept from middle way and the concept from Rice Seedling Sutra, the phrases become, whoever sees dependent arising or dependent origination sees Dharma. Whoever sees Dharma sees the emptiness. And whoever sees emptiness sees the Buddha. Okay, now, summary. Samatha is we contemplate an object. Vipassana is we contemplate the mind. Okay, so observer, when contemplate the mind, we need to overcome two kinds of obstacles. One is defiled mind that will come from our eight consciousness. And also we need to overcome the Dharma. The Dharma, seeing that phenomena is true, seeing that the phenomena has true entity, seeing that the Dharma is real. Just like we think, you love me, so you have to love me forever, that kind of thing. Okay, does not exist. Okay, I hate you, so I hate you forever. That does not exist either. Okay, when we can overcome these two obstacles, we can truly rest our mind on the subjective mind and observe the emptiness. Vipassana. Okay, now Master Zhiyi taught in very short paragraph, taught us how to practice samatha, how to practice vipassana. It needs long practice, okay, in order to experience it and directly see the emptiness. Now, have the idea of how to practice samatha and vipassana in mind. Now, Master Zhiyi saying there are 5 conditions that would happen, okay, on top of what I have mentioned earlier, that there are 5 conditions when we do sitting meditation in the Chang Hwa. 5 conditions. The first is we need to, when we have like the mind is very cross, very scattered, you know, and then we need to use the samatha vipassana. We need to, you know, monkey mind, use one object, you know, focus, and focus. And the second is the mind is like thinking, you know. Yeah, it's no wandering thoughts, very few wandering thoughts, but your mind is very down. Then if you are not aware enough, you fall asleep thinking. Floating is like, no wandering thought, but your mind is here. Boom, your mind go that way. Pew, 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 pew. Then your mind go that way. Then just like floating here. Then at this point, Master Zhiyi say, you know, you have to do something. The focus points need to change in order to keep your mind in a balanced state. And then third is when this does not work, we have to change the strategy, okay, to handle these difficulties. So I make a table to make it clear. So when the mind is crosses and scattered, and first choice is to use samatha, concentrate the mind. But if that does not work, you know, if that does not work, for example, you just come to the retreat after fighting with your spouse, you know, emotions very strong. Samatha, I cannot concentrate. I cannot concentrate at this part. Use vipassana, okay, loving kindness, gratitude, you know, calm your mind. And then when we overcome the emotion, and then start to use samatha. And thinking mind, you know, vipassana, because your mind's here, and then you contemplate the breathing, the sensation in the nostril area. Bring your mind up here. Or floating mind, then samatha, bring your attention to your belly button. Okay, so that's very easy, obvious strategy. But then third condition is when that doesn't work, you have to switch the strategy. Okay, even though you have a thinking mind, but you have to practice samatha. Maybe, you know, put more effort on your focus. Okay, and if you have floating mind, if you know the samatha doesn't work, and maybe practice the causes and conditions, you know, and to bring your mind back to the balance level. And the fourth condition is, okay, now your practice is well, your mind go to the subtle state. Okay, then we need to use samatha to detach the grasping and wrong view, just like the troubleshooting state that, you know, when our mind is very subtle, and it's a joy. And it will become an attachment. So people will sit 3 hours, 4 hours, 7 hours a day because it's so peaceful, so joyful, so quiet, good sensation. And it becomes attachment for us to grasp on. And the wrong view is that we think that is real. That is not real. That's illusion that we need to let go of. And or we can use vipassana to see the emptiness of the subtle mind. So what is your mind in the subtle state? You are in a peace and quietful mind. What is the mind? Actually, chana, the mind is continuing with so many thoughts. Contemplate on it. Okay, to overcome this attachment to the subtle, peaceful mind. The fifth is called balancing the cultivation of samadhi and wisdom. So this is very important advice for advanced practitioners, because when you are more samadhi person, when you go to the subtle mind, it will easily lead you to dhyana, first level, second level dhyana, and you don't have the wisdom. And when you get out of samadhi, get out of dhyana, you still have vexation. You don't have the wisdom power to overcome the vexation. So because you are focused more on samatha, and the wisdom cannot arise, and vice versa. When you focus on vipassana and no samadhi power, the wisdom, the contemplation, subtle mind does not last long. It probably just like me, 1 section or 2 sections and it's gone. Because I don't have samadhi power. So this kind of contemplation, subtle mind state will not last. So this is the fifth advice that the Master Zhiyi provide for the practitioners who practice samatha and vipassana. And now, because the time is up, 1 minute left, so I would like to summarize. In this book, Essentials for Practicing Samatha, Coming and Insight, Master Zhiyi's book is mainly introductory for the beginners. Even though samatha vipassana is the core main method, but does not elaborate into very detail yet. Like, we need to get into more detail with the practice of the 6 gates to the submind, or we need to, practice with the guideline in the so-called saha ma samatha vipassana mohe ziguan. Okay, but then we can use the 6 gates to the subline to summarize the samatha and vipassana practice. So counting the breath, following the breath, and stilling the mind, it belongs to samatha. And observing the mind, transformation of the mind, and complete purification of the minds belong to vipassana. And from my previous content, samatha is to cultivate no abiding. Vipassana is to contemplate no form and no thought of the mind. So these 3 notes, like I mentioned earlier, is the main practice in the Platform Sutra. So I talk about Diamond Sutra, I talk about Platform Sutra. These are all the core teaching that Mahayana practitioners are very think highly of. Okay, so samatha vipassana, of course, will be a very useful method for Mahayana practitioners as well. Okay, so I have stopped here. I will talk about this next talk. So next talk,